Thanksgiving at my parents' house always looked like something pulled straight from a lifestyle magazine. Perfect lighting, perfect tableware, perfect presentation, and absolutely no room for anything imperfect. My mother had a gift for manufacturing moments that made us appear harmonious, polished, enviable. And as always, the centerpiece of her performance was my sister Lily. She tapped her wine glass lightly, smiling the way she always did when she wanted everyone at the table to turn toward Lily. "I still can't get over how beautiful that wedding was," she announced, as if the room needed reminding. "Truly unforgettable." Her eyes drifted toward me a second later. "So, Kat, when should we expect yours?" A few polite laughs scattered around the table. My father, ever the quiet one, continued carving the turkey like it required absolute focus. Lily sat serenely across from me, her posture elegant, her expression carefully blank. She didn't jump in to defend me. She never did. Instead, she watched me with the same gentle detachment she'd mastered since childhood. Once, I would have smiled and shrugged it off. I would have let the joke settle into my ribs like a bruise, only to fade without ever being acknowledged. But this year was different. This year, I carried the truth in my bag like a stone I was finally ready to drop. I placed my fork down and breathed. "Actually," I said calmly, "I already had my wedding." The entire table froze. I could feel the stillness tighten, like the air had thickened. Even my father's knife stopped mid-slice, suspended above the turkey like he'd forgotten what he was doing. My mother's smile faltered. "What do you mean?" she asked, blinking too quickly. "You got invitations," I said. "All of you." The silence that followed was so sharp it felt like it could cut glass. The kind of silence that makes people sit straighter. The kind that pulls heat from the room. My father was the first to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. "Kat, we never received any invitations." His words weren't a surprise. They weren't even disappointing anymore. They were simply confirmation, a familiar line in a script they'd perfected long ago. I reached slowly into my bag, feeling the eyes of everyone at the table tracking my movements. They didn't know what I was about to pull out. They didn't know everything they'd neatly ignored or quietly rewritten was about to surface. But I did, and the truth was heavier than anything sitting on that table. What I pulled from my bag didn't just expose a lie, it unraveled years of silence. Growing up, I learned that my family conducted life like a curated exhibition. There were frames on the wall and captions beneath them, perfect photos, tidy achievements, and rehearsed stories for the neighbors. Lily's picture always hung in the middle. She smiled with practiced ease. Her milestones were the ones worth photographing. My successes existed, but they were the filler, the little details that made her spotlight look bigger. I never rebelled. I learned to move politely out of the way, to applaud loudly for the features that deserved applause, and to keep my own wins small and private. It was simpler that way. In my head I called it diplomacy. In reality, it was survival. Then Seattle happened. The move was less a dramatic escape than a necessity. 3 hours felt like a lifetime of breathing room. My apartment wasn't large, just a narrow place with tall windows and a kitchen that smelled of dark roast and the kind of dinners Ethan made when he was thinking out loud. My work analyzing river data and contamination patterns didn't translate into applause at holiday dinners, but it mattered to me. It mattered in a clear, stubborn way I had never felt at home. Ethan saw me. Not the version polished for photographs, but the real version who stayed up late writing code for an environmental model or got excited over a new sample analysis. He listened. He remembered the small things, the name of a rare algae bloom I was tracking, the exact vintage of a song I hummed when I was happy. His family noticed me too, and this was the strangest part. They asked follow-up questions. Helen asked about my work with a specificity my mother never offered. Robert teased me about my coffee habit as if it were endearing. They didn't treat me like background. When Ethan proposed one fog-thin June morning by a harbor that smelled faintly of salt and diesel, I answered without the rehearsed hesitation I expected. We wanted something modest. A tiny coastal chapel, a short walk to the water, people who knew our real story. I designed the invitations myself, simple paper, hand-lettered font, and mailed them with delivery confirmation because old habits die hard. I had watched my family misplace things before. I didn't want an excuse left to chance. The confirmations rolled in, delivered, signed, received. Relief folded through me like a tide. I let myself picture faces at our ceremony, soft light, and the few voices that mattered leaning close. Then there was nothing. No calls, no messages, not a single mention in the family chat. A blank space where a reaction should have lived. Ethan didn't let me sit inside the worry alone. He showed me how to check the activity logs and tracking receipts. That's when the pattern stopped feeling like chance. One invitation had been opened and deleted from the family email the moment it arrived. The delivery scanner showed a neat, looping signature on April 23rd, familiar in the way only handwriting can be. The same curl I'd seen 1,000 times on permission slips and card sign-ins. Her signature. I could picture Lily at the kitchen counter, sorting envelopes the way she always had, an unseen gatekeeper. Evidence from my saved receipts, and the logs left no room for polite explanations. Transcript 1. That night at Thanksgiving, with the invitations tucked into my bag, I decided to stop pretending. The days leading up to Thanksgiving were a quiet ache. I kept replaying the same questions in my head, questions I already knew the answers to, but somehow couldn't stop asking. Why hadn't they said anything? Why hadn't they even pretended to care? The silence from home wasn't passive. It had shape, intention. It pressed on me during my commute, settled into the corners of my apartment, and lingered behind every mundane task. I almost bowed out of Thanksgiving entirely. It would have been easy to claim a work emergency, a traffic issue, a sudden cold. Excuses were the one thing my parents always accepted without probing. But avoidance had built the foundation of every wound I carried. Staying silent had kept the peace and suffocated me at the same time. I knew that if I didn't show up, they'd write the story without me, the way they always had. So I went. Walking into my childhood home felt like slipping into an old, uncomfortable coat. Everything was familiar, but none of it fit anymore. The house smelled like rosemary and lemon polish, the same scent my mother used before every hosted dinner. The same playlist of soft jazz buzzed in the background, carefully chosen to sound tasteful without drawing attention. Even the framed gallery of Lily's achievements along the hallway had expanded, an extra row of wedding portraits added since September. In the living room, Lily was perched near the fireplace, posing as her husband lifted her chin just slightly to catch better lighting. The click of the camera was steady and practiced. It was ridiculous how easy it was for her, how she slipped into center stage without even trying. My mother fluttered around them, adjusting angles, smoothing Lily's hair, recounting the elegance of the September ceremony to anyone within 3 feet. I stood there for several seconds before anyone noticed I'd arrived. My father gave me a half-hearted smile from the kitchen doorway, warm but distracted. He always seemed torn between wanting to reach me and wanting to avoid disrupting the balance my mother curated so carefully. The balance where Lily shined and I blended into soft background tones. No one asked about my drive. No one asked how I'd been. Certainly no one asked about the wedding they all missed. It was as if the entire event had been scrubbed from existence. I kept my coat on for a full minute before Lily glanced up at me. Her gaze was coolly neutral, the same practiced expression she wore whenever she had something to hide. That was when I knew, down to my bones, that she remembered everything. But the real shift didn't happen until dinner began. Dinner began exactly the way it always did in my family, scripted, polished, and painfully predictable. My mother moved around the table like the director of a stage production, rearranging forks and napkins as if their alignment could force the rest of us into harmony. My father poured wine with quiet precision, avoiding eye contact with anyone who might ask him to intervene in something emotional. Lily sat poised with her hands folded, her engagement and wedding rings catching the warm chandelier light like tiny spotlights she wore proudly. Small talk started first. My mother launched into a long monologue about the florist from Lily's ceremony, how stunning the arrangements were, how guests were still raving about the reception. Someone down the table complimented the photographs. My mother beamed as if she'd taken them herself. Every anecdote revolved around Lily, her gown, her decorator, her guest list, her honeymoon itinerary. It was like watching someone polish the same trophy over and over. I kept my expression neutral, nodding occasionally, forking small portions of food onto my plate. I'd grown skilled at making myself small in these moments, quiet enough not to cause a ripple, present enough not to appear rude. But this time, every word, every laugh, every brag felt like sandpaper against the truth I carried. No one asked what was new with me. No one asked how recently my own life had changed. It was almost remarkable how a room full of people could erase something so big simply by agreeing not to mention it. The chatter softened as dessert plates were handed out. Then my mother tapped her glass, twice, signaling attention like a conductor calling for silence. Her smile was wide, gleaming, performative. "I just want to say again how proud we are of Lily," she began, her voice honey-sweet. "Her wedding was just extraordinary." She looked toward Lily, who lowered her lashes modestly, the picture of graceful gratitude. Then my mother turned her gaze on me. "So, Kat, when will we be celebrating yours?" There it was, the same line she'd used countless times, a teasing jab, a subtle reminder of my supposed lack. But this time, it sliced differently, because I knew she wasn't clueless. She was choosing the narrative she preferred, one where my wedding didn't exist. The table chuckled lightly. Even my father's carving knife paused, half an inch above the platter, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. Lily watched me carefully. Too carefully. She already sensed something was different. I swallowed a breath. Then I set my dessert spoon down softly. "I already had mine," I said. The room went still in an instant. What followed next didn't just shock the table, it exposed the cracks beneath years of family denial. The silence that followed my words didn't simply expand, it tightened. It wrapped around the table like an invisible cord, pulling every expression taut. Even the candles seemed to flicker less, as if the room itself were holding its breath. My mother blinked, her smile faltering just enough to reveal the crack beneath it. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice pitched too high, too controlled. I met her gaze evenly. "I got married 6 months ago." A fork clattered against a plate. My father's shoulders stiffened, and the carving knife he'd been holding lowered slowly, as if he were afraid any sudden movement would shatter the fragile stillness. Across from me, Lily didn't gasp or flinch. She simply stilled, and that was all the confirmation I needed. Stillness was her tell. My mother shook her head softly, bewildered. "Kat, sweetheart, we never received any invitations." Her tone carried the same carefully orchestrated innocence she used whenever she wanted the room to align with her version of events. The practiced denial almost made me laugh. I leaned back slightly, steadying my breath. "You did," I replied. "All of you did." My father's voice cracked on the next word. "We didn't." He rubbed his thumb along the stem of his wine glass, a habit he fell into whenever uncomfortable truths crept too close. Part of me wanted to feel sympathy for him, for how often he'd played diplomat between my mother's narrative and the reality everyone else lived in, but tonight I didn't. Lily shifted her weight, just barely, but she didn't speak. That silence was louder than any admission. I reached down and placed my bag on my lap. The zipper sounded impossibly loud in the quiet room. No one spoke as I slid my phone out and set it carefully on the tablecloth. The screen lit up with a soft glow, reflecting off the silverware. The air changed. People leaned in slightly, some with curiosity, some with dread. This was the moment I had both feared and prepared for, the moment where I stopped letting my family rewrite the story of my life. I tapped the screen and opened the first file. A neat green check mark. Delivered. Below it, the signature line. Smooth, looping, unmistakably familiar. I angled the phone toward the table so they could all see. "That's Lily's signature," I said quietly. My mother gasped. My father's eyes widened. A cousin's hand flew to her mouth. Only Lily didn't react. Her face remained carefully composed, an actress before an audience she believed she could still control. For a long moment, no one breathed. The signature glared up from the screen, bold, practiced, unmistakably hers. My mother stared at it as though sheer disbelief might blur the letters into something less damning. My father leaned forward, his brows knitting together as if trying to force reason into a truth he didn't want to accept. But Lily didn't move. Her stillness wasn't shock. It was calculation. I recognized it instantly, the same expression she wore whenever she was cornered but refused to surrender. Ryan, her husband, looked between the screen and his wife with a confused tightness forming around his jaw. "Lily," he said slowly, "is that your signature?" The question landed heavily. Lily finally inhaled, a sharp, controlled breath. I sign for the mail all the time, she replied, her tone flat but precise. It doesn't mean I read everything. My father rubbed a hand over his face. But 4 separate packages? From your sister? All around the same time. His voice cracked on the last word. Not anger, but a kind of tired disbelief. Lily's eyes flicked to him, then back to me. I get a lot of deliveries, she said, shrugging lightly. I don't memorize every envelope that comes through. It was a weak defense. Even she knew it, but she clung to it anyway. I kept my voice calm. The invitations weren't envelopes. They were flat boxes, each with a printed label, each requiring a signature, and the tracking shows you signed for every one. The room fell quiet again. This time, when Lily shifted, it wasn't subtle. She crossed her arms tightly, the gesture defensive, her shoulders stiffening. The practiced serenity she wore so easily had begun to crack around the edges. I didn't see any invitations, she insisted, louder now, the beginnings of frustration sharpening her tone. Maybe I put them somewhere and forgot. Maybe Mom moved them. I don't know. My mother looked genuinely offended. Me? Why would I hide invitations to your sister's wedding? She reached out as if to touch Lily's arm, but Lily pulled back slightly. That, more than anything, told the truth. I opened the next image, an email server log, time-stamped and specific. This is the notification that went to the family email, I said. It was opened from your device. Then deleted. Lily froze. Her composure splintered in real time. I watched her eyes flicker rapidly, anger, panic, calculation, resentment, all fighting for dominance. That doesn't prove anything, she snapped. People click things accidentally. My mother deflated. My father looked older. And I felt something inside me settle into clarity, solid and steady. It proves enough, I said softly. The room felt colder, as if someone had suddenly opened a window. But it wasn't the air, it was a shift in Lily. Up until now, she had clung to her script, the polished, innocent facade she'd perfected over a lifetime. But with every piece of evidence laid before her, that facade started to crack. Ryan leaned forward, his elbows pressing into the table. Lily, he said, voice low and steady, did you delete Kat's email? She didn't answer immediately. The delay said more than any denial could have. She started, but her voice caught. She lifted her chin in a defensive gesture I recognized too well. I don't remember. I get notifications constantly. Maybe I clicked it. Maybe I deleted it. That doesn't mean anything. It means you knew, I said quietly. You knew the invitations came. Her eyes snapped toward me, anger flickering across her features in a way she couldn't smooth over quickly enough. That flash, sharp, raw, was something she usually kept hidden. The real Lily, the one who needed control like oxygen. My father's jaw tightened. Honey, he said carefully, if you saw something from Kat, why didn't you say anything to us? Lily scoffed, the sound edged and bitter. Oh, so now this is my fault? I'm responsible for everyone's mail, for everyone's schedules. That's not fair. My mother tried to soothe her. No one said that, sweetie. You implied it, Lily snapped back. You always do. Her voice trembled, not with fear but with a deep, festering resentment. Everyone expects me to handle everything. And then when something goes wrong, suddenly it's all on me. Ryan stared at her, stunned. Lily, no one expects you to. Don't, she cut him off. Don't act like you don't know how this family works. The room froze again. This was the first time Lily had ever been openly emotional in front of the whole family. Her voice was cracking, her posture unraveling. The golden child was fraying right at the edges of her role. My mother reached for her hand. Honey, we're just trying to understand. Understand what? Lily demanded. That Kat is perfect and I'm the villain. She jabbed a finger toward me. She always gets to be the quiet, innocent, poor-neglected sister. She doesn't even have to try. The accusation hit the table like a dropped plate. Everyone stared at her. Even Lily looked shocked at her own words, like they had slipped out before she could coat them in sugar. I exhaled slowly. I never asked to be innocent, Lily. I just wanted to be included. She looked away, jaw clenched so tightly it trembled. The truth was finally bleeding through. And just when the room thought it had heard the worst of it, Lily revealed something that made every jaw at the table drop. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The air felt heavy, saturated with the weight of what Lily had just confessed, accidentally or not. Her words still hung in the room, trembling like a struck chord. My mother looked stunned, my father looked wounded, and Ryan looked like he had suddenly been dropped into someone else's marriage. Lily pressed her palms flat against the table, fingers trembling just a little. "You don't get it," she said, her voice lower now, almost desperate. "You've never gotten it. Being the one everyone looks at isn't easy." I stared at her, genuinely taken aback. "You think I wanted people to ignore me?" She laughed, a sharp, hollow sound. "No. You wanted people to notice you without having to compete." My brows knit. "Compete? Lily, we're sisters. It was never supposed to be a competition." "Maybe not for you," she shot back, her voice cracking. "But for me? It was always a performance. Everything I did mattered. Every choice I made was watched. I couldn't gain a pound without Mom acting like the sky was falling. I couldn't say no to activities without being told I was wasting my potential. I couldn't fail quietly. I couldn't even rest without disappointing someone." The admission stunned the room into a different kind of silence, not sharp this time, but dense. My mother frowned, genuinely confused. "Sweetheart, we just wanted the best for you." "No, Mom," Lily said with an exhaustion I'd never seen. "You wanted the best version of me. The one that looked good. The one you could brag about. The one that made you feel like a perfect parent." My mother's breath hitched. My father closed his eyes. Lily swallowed hard. And then Kat. Kat never had to do any of that. She could do her own thing without anyone hovering. She could disappear into her room, and no one complained. She could get B's, and no one panicked. She could quit things, walk away from things, and it was fine. Her voice trembled. "Do you know how much I envied that?" The words hit me like a slow, unexpected wave. Years of resentment, misread silence, misunderstood distance suddenly came into focus from a different angle. "You envied me?" I asked quietly. She wiped at her eyes, frustrated. "Of course I did. You think I tried so hard because I loved being the center of everything? No. Half the time I wish someone else would take that spotlight away." I stared at her, the room spinning just slightly as the truth rearranged old memories. It didn't excuse what she had done, but it made the roots visible. But the reason she hid my invitations, that truth was still coming, and it cut deeper than anything said so far. Lily's confession lingered in the space between us, raw, uneven, vulnerable in a way I'd never witnessed before. For a moment, the room softened. My father's shoulders eased, my mother's expression faltered, and even I felt something shift inside my chest. But the softness didn't last. There was still the matter of the invitations, still the rupture sitting in the middle of the table like a live wire. I folded my hands in front of me. "Lily," I said gently, "if you felt all that, then why hide my wedding? Why not talk to me? Why make sure no one saw the invitations?" Her eyes flicked toward mine, then away. Her throat bobbed with a swallow. "Because," she stopped. Her jaw clenched. Ryan leaned in, voice steady but heavy with disbelief. "Because why, Lily?" She let out a shaky breath, fingers tightening around her napkin. "Because everything was falling apart," she whispered. "I was planning a huge wedding. I was barely sleeping. Mom kept adding people to the guest list. Dad was stressed. Vendors were behind. And suddenly, your invitation showed up. The admission was quiet, but it cracked like thunder. I felt the muscles in my neck tighten. So, my wedding was small. It wasn't a competition. That's just it," Lily said, her voice rising again, but this time with despair rather than anger. "Yours was simple, real. You didn't care about centerpieces or chair bows or signature cocktails. You didn't have 1,000 expectations on your back. Everyone who came to yours wanted to be there for you, not for a show." Her voice wavered, and I realized people might talk about how meaningful your ceremony was, how calm it felt, how intimate, and then they'd come to my giant circus 3 months later and start comparing. She pressed her palms to her forehead. I couldn't handle that. I couldn't handle any more judgment. So I panicked. The truth landed like a punch to the gut. Not jealousy of my happiness. Not hatred. Not even spite. Fear. Crushing, consuming fear. That's not an excuse, Ryan said, his voice breaking. That's sabotage. She looked at him then, really looked, and the guilt in her expression was unmistakable. I know, she whispered. I know it was wrong. I just couldn't face the idea of being overshadowed when everything in my life was spinning. My mother's face fell into her hands. My father stared at the tablecloth, as if the pattern might offer answers. I breathed slowly, steadying myself. Lily, I said, you didn't just hide a piece of mail. You erased one of the most important days of my life. Her eyes glistened. I know, but knowing didn't undo it. And the moment I confronted her with the final proof, the one she couldn't talk her way around, the entire room shifted again. Lily's whispered admission hung in the space between us, guilty, trembling, and far too small to cover the damage she'd done. The room felt unbalanced, like a table with one uneven leg threatening to tip everything over. My mother kept wiping beneath her eyes, even though no tears had fallen. My father looked like he was staring straight through the tablecloth into some memory he wished he could rewrite. But apologies, especially half-formed ones, weren't enough. Not after what she'd taken. Not after how deeply it cut. I took a slow breath and unlocked my phone again. There's one more thing, I said. Lily's eyes sharpened instantly, like a cornered animal catching the shift in the air. My father straightened. Kat, maybe we've heard enough for now. No, I said gently but firmly. You haven't. I pulled up the last document, the one Ethan had insisted I save in case this moment ever came. The one that didn't just show signatures or deleted emails, but something far more irrefutable. A scanned image filled the screen. One of my wedding invitations. Crisp, elegant, slightly dented on the corner, and unmistakably real. The one my father would later find in a garage storage box, but none of them knew that part yet. My mother gasped. My father leaned in, so close his reflection warped across the screen. Where did you get that? I let the silence stretch just long enough for the truth to settle in the pit of everyone's stomach. This one, I said, was found in your house, in an old storage box, months after the wedding, exactly where it was placed and forgotten. My gaze locked on Lily. Someone hid it. Lily's breath hitched. A slight twitch in her jaw betrayed the panic she was scrambling to contain. That's not. I wouldn't put it in a box, she stammered. Why would I put it there? That doesn't make sense. You're right, I said softly. It doesn't make sense. Unless someone wanted it out of sight. My father's voice cracked. Lily, did you put your sister's invitation in storage? Her eyes darted downward. Her fingers clenched so tight around her napkin I could hear it strain. I don't even know where that box is, she whispered, but even she didn't sound convinced by her own words. Ryan exhaled slowly, disbelief hardening into something colder, something like betrayal. Lily, just tell the truth. Her composure broke, shattering into uneven breaths. Fine, she snapped. I hid them. All right. I hid them because I couldn't deal with it. I didn't want anyone talking about her wedding. I didn't want anyone comparing us. And I knew if I told Mom and Dad, they'd pressure me or say it wasn't a big deal or make me feel stupid. I panicked. I messed up. I'm sorry. The confession was loud, raw, but not enough. I nodded slowly. Thank you for telling the truth. But you didn't just panic, Lily. You made a choice that erased me. She swallowed hard, but didn't argue. Because she knew it too. But the fallout from her confession didn't end there, because the next person to speak was the one no one expected to break the family silence. For a moment, no one dared speak. Lily's confession sat in the middle of the table like a cracked glass, silent, jagged, impossible to ignore. My mother kept staring at her daughter as if she were a stranger. My father's hands had gone still around his wine glass. Even the distant hum of the refrigerator felt louder in the quiet. And then, the silence broke. But not from my parents. Not from Lily. Not from me. It came from Ryan. His voice, usually warm, steady and supportive, sounded nothing like itself. It was rough, scraped raw, like he'd swallowed gravel. Lily, he began, sitting a little straighter, what else did you hide? Her eyes snapped toward him, wide and startled. What? Nothing. Just the invitations. That's it. But Ryan wasn't convinced. Anyone could see that. He leaned both palms on the table, fingers splayed, muscles tight. No. I need you to think before you answer. Because if you're willing to sabotage your own sister's wedding, his jaw tensed. What else have you kept from me? From us. Lily's breath stuttered. Panic flickered across her face. Ryan, please don't do this. Not here. But the dam had already cracked. Ryan shook his head slowly. No, Lily. I need the truth. You kept this from me. You let me sit at your wedding reception and talk about how happy I was that your family was so close. You let me say that. You let me think it. It didn't hurt you, Lily muttered, but even she realized how weak that sounded. Ryan's voice grew firmer. It hurt her. And you didn't even care. Lily recoiled, her face crumpling. That's not true. Then why didn't you come clean? He pressed. Why didn't you tell me when you saw the first RSVP didn't come in? When the weeks went by with nothing? You knew something was off. You knew Kat wouldn't just go silent. Lily looked down at her lap, shoulders curling inward. I was ashamed, she whispered. I thought if I admitted it, everyone would think I was awful. No, Ryan said quietly. You were afraid people would think Kat mattered as much as you. The words landed with a dull thud, heavy, undeniable. My mother gasped softly. My father closed his eyes, pain tightening the lines of his face. Lily flinched as if struck. Ryan, please, she whispered. I never meant to hurt anyone. But you did, he said, voice low. You hurt your sister. You hurt me. And you hurt this entire family by keeping us in the dark. Lily's shoulders shook. For the first time all night, she looked truly small. I watched it all quietly, the room spinning with decades of unspoken tension finally cracking open. And then, unexpectedly, the person who had stayed silent the longest finally spoke, and what he said changed everything. The room had been teetering on the edge of collapse for what felt like hours, but it wasn't until my father finally inhaled, slow, deliberate, that everything truly shifted. He set down his wine glass with a faint clink, the sound delicate but sharp enough to pull every gaze toward him. My father was a quiet man, a man of routines, of soft nods and careful words. Growing up, he rarely raised his voice, rarely challenged my mother's narratives, rarely inserted himself into emotional confrontations. He lived in the in-between spaces, neutral by habit rather than conviction. But now, he wasn't neutral. He looked first at Lily, then at me, then down at the table, as if searching for a place where the truth might rest without shattering everything. Lily, he said softly, why didn't you tell us? His voice wasn't angry, it was worse. It was disappointed. And for Lily, who had spent her entire life performing for approval, disappointment was a devastating blow. Her chin trembled. I thought if you knew Kat was getting married, you'd be upset that I didn't have everything perfect yet. You'd compare us. You always compare us. My father's brow furrowed deeply, grief pooling in the lines around his eyes. Sweetheart, we didn't compare you. Your mother, she pushes. Yes. She worries. She wants to show off. But me. He shook his head. I never wanted you to feel that way. My mother's lips parted in protest. I didn't compare. He lifted a hand gently, and shockingly, she fell silent. He turned to me next. Kat, he said quietly, I failed you. The words hit me like a wave I didn't expect. He continued, voice roughening. I should have asked why we weren't hearing anything about your engagement. I should have checked when nothing arrived. I should have paid more attention. He swallowed hard. I thought you were just busy. Growing up. Building your own life. I didn't realize you stopped expecting us to show up. My throat tightened. I had spent years imagining him apologizing, but never like this. Never with such sincerity that it made my chest ache. Dad, I began softly, but he wasn't finished. He looked straight at Lily. And I should never have let you become the gatekeeper of this family. That wasn't your job. It wasn't fair to you, and it wasn't fair to your sister. A long, trembling silence followed. Lily blinked hard, tears finally spilling over. I didn't want the responsibility, she whispered. I just didn't know how to step out of it. My father nodded slowly, as if acknowledging a truth years overdue. Then tonight is the first step. But what my mother said next reignited every buried wound, and the explosion that followed was unavoidable. My mother had been unusually quiet, her hands clasped together on the table as if in prayer. But when my father finished speaking, when he dared to acknowledge fault, imbalance, and the consequences of their choices, her silence broke like thin ice. She straightened in her chair, shoulders pulled tight, a defensive rigidity settling over her posture. "I don't like the way this is being framed," she said, voice trembling just slightly. "I never played favorites. I supported both my daughters equally. The denial hit me like déjà vu, familiar, predictable, and so deeply untrue it almost felt rehearsed." My father exhaled. "Helen!" "No," she cut in sharply, refusing to let him finish. "This entire conversation is unfair. Lily has always needed more guidance, more structure. Kat was independent. She didn't require the same attention." I stared at her, stunned. "Mom, attention isn't something a child should have to require. It's something you give." She shook her head dismissively. "Kat, you've always been so dramatic. You were fine. You were fine." The casual dismissal burrowed into my chest, sharp and familiar. And Lily, now openly crying, let out a soft, strangled laugh. "Mom," Lily said, wiping her cheeks, "I wasn't fine." My mother froze. "You pushed me into everything," Lily continued. "Dance, cheer, pageants, AP classes, theater. You said it was to help me succeed, but really, it was so you had something to brag about." "That isn't true," my mother insisted, voice rising. "It is," Lily insisted. "It always was." The room vibrated with a new tension, one born not from shock, but from years of silenced things finally crawling into the light. Then Lily turned to me, her voice breaking. "And while you were showing me off, Kat became invisible." I swallowed, caught off guard by the accuracy of her words. My mother hardened, voice cold. "I gave Kat space. She didn't like being the center of attention." I let out a hollow laugh. "I didn't like being ignored. That's not the same thing." My mother's face twisted, wounded in a way that felt performative, not genuine. "I did everything I could for this family," she snapped. "And now you're all sitting here acting like I'm the villain." My father rubbed his temples. "Helen, no one is calling you a villain." "No," I said quietly, "but we're finally calling out the harm." Her eyes filled with something sharp, defensiveness, pride, maybe fear. "I will not be blamed for your insecurities." The words dug deep, reopening a wound I'd spent years trying to close. And something inside me snapped. What I said next wasn't planned, just the truth I'd buried for far too long, and its impact stunned everyone at the table. The moment my mother dismissed everything as insecurities, something long dormant in me jolted awake. It wasn't rage, not exactly. It was clarity, sharp and cold, rising like a tide I could no longer hold back. "I'm not insecure," I said, my voice steady enough to surprise even myself. "I'm exhausted." The room stilled. My mother frowned. "Exhausted from what?" "From feeling like a guest in my own family," I replied. "From being treated like an afterthought. From being told I was fine every time I needed attention or support. From watching you pour everything into Lily and then denying it when the truth finally shows up." My father closed his eyes. Lily stared into her lap. "I'm exhausted," I continued, "from shrinking myself so you wouldn't accuse me of trying to take anything from her. From learning how to celebrate quietly because it made you uncomfortable when the spotlight wasn't on the child you chose to invest in." My mother's face hardened. "I invested in both of you." "No," I said calmly. "You invested in Lily's performance. You tolerated my existence." Gasps echoed softly along the table. A cousin whispered something under her breath. But I didn't stop. "When I won the science fair in 8th grade, you told me to take the picture later because the lighting was better for Lily's new headshots." Her eyes flickered. "When I got into my first choice college, you congratulated me and then asked if I could help Lily practice her cheer routine that night." "That isn't fair," my mother protested, her voice shaky now. "It's the truth," I said gently. "And it's painful. And I'm tired of being the only one who has to swallow that pain quietly." I turned to Lily. She looked devastated, guilt mixing with recognition. "And Lily," I said softly, "I never wanted your spotlight. I just wanted a place at the table." Her lips trembled. Kat, I know. My mother leaned back, shaking her head, as if the conversation itself was an attack. You are rewriting our entire family history. No, I said. I'm finally telling mine. She inhaled sharply, anger and hurt swirling behind her eyes. And now you expect me to apologize? After everything I've done? After raising 2 girls on a tight budget? After sacrificing so much? I tilted my head. Mom, love isn't sacrifice if the person you're sacrificing for never asked you to. The words settled over the table like dust. Fine. Inescapable. Suffocating. My mother didn't respond. She couldn't. She looked stunned, as if everything she believed about herself had been pulled out from under her feet. But what happened next, when I finally stood up for myself, shifted the entire balance of the room and forced everyone to confront the truth. Something inside me, something small and quiet that had survived years of being overlooked, finally stood tall. I didn't shout. I didn't tremble. I simply rose from my chair. The legs scraped softly against the hardwood floor, but the sound sliced through the room like a decisive cut. Every pair of eyes followed me. My mother's expression tightened. Sit down, Kat, she said, her voice sharp but unsteady. We're not done. Yes, I said. We are. Her mouth fell open slightly, as if no one had ever rejected her authority, so plainly. Maybe no one had. I placed both hands on the back of my chair, grounding myself. I came here tonight hoping, maybe foolishly, for acknowledgement. Not a parade, not a speech, just the smallest recognition that my wedding mattered. My voice wavered for the first time, but all I found was denial. My father stood as well, out of instinct or solidarity, I wasn't sure. Kat, please. We can talk this through. We are talking, I said gently. For the first time, we really are. But talking won't fix years of silence in one night. My mother's eyes glistened with something, not exactly sorrow, not exactly regret. Something more like the shock of losing control. You're being dramatic, she whispered. I nodded once. Maybe. Or maybe I've just been quiet for so long that honesty sounds dramatic. Lily wiped a tear, her voice small. Kat, please don't leave like this. I met her gaze. I'm not leaving to punish you. I'm leaving because I need air. I need space. And I need to stop expecting you all to become people you've never been. My father reached for my arm, but stopped halfway, his hand hovering uncertainly. We want to do better, he said softly. I believe that, I replied. At least for you. I took a breath. But wanting isn't enough. I need action. I need change. And I need boundaries. My mother scoffed under her breath, but it didn't derail me. I spent most of my life shaping myself around this family, I continued, trying not to disrupt anything, trying not to take up space. Tonight proved something I've always known but never said out loud. I can't keep sacrificing myself for a family that doesn't see me unless it's convenient. A long, trembling stillness followed. Then I slid my coat from the back of the chair. The simple motion hit the room like a shockwave. Kat, my father whispered, please don't go. I hesitated just for a second, because despite everything, hearing him plead hurt more than all the silence that came before. But I straightened my shoulders. I have to, I said quietly. For me. And as I walked toward the door, the final words I left them with unraveled whatever illusion of closeness still remained. I walked slowly toward the hallway, every step echoing louder than the last. My parents' house had always been a museum of curated memories, photos arranged by perceived importance, achievements ranked silently on the walls. I'd grown up learning to move quietly in these spaces, to avoid knocking anything out of place. But tonight, something inside me had shifted. I wasn't afraid of disrupting the display anymore. I reached for my coat, slipping one arm through the sleeve. Behind me, chairs scraped, breaths hitched, and someone muttered my name like a plea. But I didn't turn around. For the first time in my life, the pull of their expectations wasn't strong enough to stop me. My mother rose abruptly from her seat. If you walk out that door, she warned, you are creating a rift in this family. I paused with my coat half on. Her tone was sharp, steady, but beneath it, I heard something else. Fear. Not fear of losing me. Fear of losing control of the narrative. I turned slowly to face her. There was already a rift, I said calmly. I just stopped pretending I couldn't see it. Her face tightened. You're twisting my words. You're blowing everything out of proportion. I shook my head gently. Mom, this isn't about proportion. This is about honesty. And for years, honesty wasn't allowed unless it fit the story you wanted to tell. She opened her mouth to argue, but nothing came out. Lily pushed herself up from the table too, eyes red, mascara smudged. Kat, please, she whispered. I'm trying. I know I screwed up. I know I hurt you. But I'm trying to fix it. I met her gaze, searching for something. Truth, remorse, recognition. I found all three. It softened something in me, but not enough to keep me standing in that room. I hear you, I said, and I appreciate that you're trying. But healing isn't something that happens in one night, and it's not something I can do while sitting in the middle of the same old patterns. Lily nodded slowly, tears spilling again. Ryan placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, grounding her in a way only he could. He didn't speak, but the look he gave me held understanding, maybe even gratitude, for finally forcing the truth into the light. My father approached me then, steps hesitant. Kat, he said softly, you don't have to fix everything tonight. But don't shut the door completely. Something in his expression broke me a little, a mix of regret and hope tangled together. I'm not shutting the door, I assured him. I'm just stepping outside it for once. I pulled my coat fully on. Then I spoke the words that had been buried inside me for years. You didn't miss my wedding. You chose not to see it. The truth dropped into the room like a stone. No one followed me as I turned and walked toward the front door. But what waited for me outside, and who opened the door before I could reach it, changed everything about how I saw myself and what family really meant. The November air hit me like a clean breath after being underwater too long. Cold, crisp, real. It startled my lungs, but in a clarifying way, like my body finally recognized what oxygen was supposed to feel like. I hadn't even made it halfway down the front steps when the door to my car opened. Ethan stood there, framed by the soft glow of the porch light, his expression already telling me he knew. He didn't look surprised or confused or tense. He looked present, grounded, like someone who had been listening not with his ears, but with his heart. He didn't ask, what happened? He didn't demand details or explanations. He didn't even look toward the house behind me. He simply stepped forward and wrapped his arms around me. And that was it, the moment the shaking I'd been holding in finally broke loose. I pressed my face into his chest, the wool of his coat smelling faintly like cedar in winter air. He held me the way someone holds something fragile but fierce, something worth protecting. Not because it's weak, but because it's finally brave enough to stop being silent. I'm here, he murmured against my hair. I've got you. And for the first time in hours, maybe years, I believed it. We stood like that for a long moment, the cold rising around us but never quite touching me. My heartbeat slowed, sinking with his. The tightness in my shoulders eased. The weight I'd carried into that house, the one I'd been lugging around since childhood, loosened its grip. When I finally lifted my head, Ethan brushed his thumb gently along my cheek. You did something incredibly hard tonight, he said quietly. I'm proud of you. No one in my family had ever said those words to me without conditions attached. No achievements required. No spotlight stolen. Just pride. Genuine, grounded, unconditional. I hadn't realized until that moment how badly I needed to hear them. He opened the car door further. Come on. Let's go home. Home. A word that had never belonged to my parents' house, no matter how many holidays we spent under its roof. A word I'd only recently understood through Ethan, his family, and the small life we were building piece by piece. I slid into the passenger seat, my fingers thawing beneath the heater vents. Ethan circled around, got in beside me, and started the engine. As he drove away from the house where I'd spent so many years feeling unseen, I didn't look back. Not once. But the real turning point didn't happen that night. It came the next morning, when someone reached out in a way I never expected. The next morning, light filtered softly through our bedroom curtains, golden, gentle, the kind of light that makes even hard truths feel a little easier to hold. I woke slowly, my body heavy but my mind strangely clear, like a storm had finally passed and left the air washed clean. Ethan was already awake, sitting beside me with a mug of coffee he'd clearly set down just moments before. He brushed my hair back with quiet tenderness. "How are you feeling?" he asked. I thought about lying, saying I was fine, saying I just needed sleep. But the truth rose naturally, as steady as breath. "Lighter," I said, "and sad, but mostly lighter." He nodded, understanding without pressing. That was one of the reasons I fell in love with him. He didn't try to fix pain. He simply stood with me in it. We spent the morning in a soft hush, making breakfast together in the kitchen, moving around each other with an ease that felt like sunlight, warm, comforting, earned. My phone sat untouched on the counter until a notification buzzed through. A voicemail. From my father. I stared at the screen for a long moment before pressing play. His voice came through soft, shaky. "Kat, I found something in the garage this morning. A box I haven't opened in years." A pause, thick with emotion. "Inside was one of your wedding invitations." My breath caught. Ethan looked at me, worry flickering across his eyes, but I nodded for him to listen with me. Dad continued, voice breaking. "It still had the original mail tag on it. Still sealed. I don't know how it ended up there. I don't know why it was put away. But I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I closed my eyes as the words washed over me. "This isn't an excuse," he added. "Just a truth I should have seen long before now. You deserve better. And I want to do better if you'll let me." The message ended. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just felt a soft, aching warmth spread through my chest. A small, fragile something opening. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But possibility. Later that afternoon, Ethan's parents invited us over for a simple brunch. No fanfare. No performance. Just warm pancakes, gentle questions about my work, real laughter filling the spaces that once felt hollow around my own family's table. Helen squeezed my hand and said, "Your family here, not because of marriage, because you matter." And for the first time in my life, I truly believe that family wasn't something you inherited. It was something you built, something you chose, something that chose you back. As we drove home, Ethan reached over and laced his fingers with mine. "You okay?" he asked. I looked out at the world passing by, the world I finally felt part of, and nodded. "I'm more than okay," I said. "I'm finally free." If you connected with this story, share where you're listening from. You're not alone, and your story matters too.